r/NoSleep. Posted by Reddit user Mr_Mojo_Risen95. I used to work as a night clerk at a motel. I had to follow a specific guideline to ensure my safety. These are my stories. Part 1. Case 1. The Puppeteer. Hello. My name is Henry, and as the title suggests, I worked 5 years as a night clerk for an old motel I stumbled upon. Upon taking the job, I initially met with my supervisor, Margot, who was an older woman, well into the twilight years of her life, but was still full of vibrant energy. She always had a tight smile across her face and wore her milky white hair in a neat bun atop her head. When I applied for the job, she led me to her back office and gave me the rundown. The motel was built sometime in the 60s and had been in Margot's family for generations. Right off of Highway 88, the motel has a history of transient folk stopping by. These weren't your families planning trips to Disney World. These were creatures of the night. Drifters, loners, escapees, derelicts. As a newly single man, I found my way to the motel cruising along the highway in the middle of the night with only a few bucks to my name and an empty stomach. The flickering neon light flashing vacancy drew me in. I rest my tired head on one of the motel's rough beds and slept the best I had in months. Margot seemed pleasant the first time we met. She reminded me of my grandmother. When I saw the looking for hire sign on the front desk, it stuck in my head like glue. When I woke, I didn't want to leave. Something about this place drew me in, like a magnetic pull in my chest. So, Margot gave me a chance I desperately needed, that would help me get back on my feet. While that chance was greatly appreciated, it did come with certain stipulations. Margot and I squashed the numbers, agreed on a wage, and offered me the job right there. I eagerly signed my name on the dotted line and shook Margot's hand. I was going to start that night. Before I could get up and leave, Margot grabbed me by the wrist, her cold, wrinkly hands holding me tight. "Henry, there's one more thing that you should know about this here motel," she shakily spoke. Curious, I readjusted in my seat, leaning forward. "Go ahead, shoot." Margot nervously reached into her fanny pack, pulling out a yellow-stained piece of folded paper. She unfolded it and slipped it across the table to me. "What's this?" I asked. "Rules, Henry. Rules that will keep you safe here. I don't mean to scare you, but things happen here, son. Thought you should be prepared," Margot responded, her shaky voice resonating in my head. Keep me safe? What did that mean? The wrinkly piece of yellow-stained paper read as the following, written in what I presume was Margot's handwriting. Number 1. The puppeteer will come only at midnight. Do not ask about his puppets, and do as he says. Number 2. Room 47 must never be booked. Number 3. Do not leave the motel after 3 a.m. Number 4. Never open the front door for anyone. It will always be unlocked for guests to come in. And number 5. If the puppeteer comes in by himself, make your way to the cellar and hide until the shift is over. Margot, are you serious with this? I scoffed. Margot bowed her head, adjusting her thick-rimmed glasses. I'm afraid so, Henry. We've lost a great deal of folk from not abiding by these guidelines. You seem like an honest man, and I hope you find what you're looking for, but trust me on this one. The seriousness in Margot's voice drew me in. Her normal, sing-song granny voice had vanished. She must be serious. Okay, Margot. I will. Don't worry about me. Thank you, son. We'll see you tonight, yeah? Margot headed back upstairs towards the front desk, where a couple stood impatiently tapping on the desk. I hung out in my car till nightfall. My little Civic had been home to me for the last 6 months since Anna left me. I read over the list a few times, burning the guidelines into my head. Questions filled my mind. Who was the puppeteer, I wondered. I had so many questions for Margot. As my mind wandered that evening, the sun began to settle. When the clock struck 8 p.m., I headed towards the motel, ready for my shift. A cool desert wind was blowing through. The hordes of cars were racing down Highway 88. Margot sat at the front desk. She looked pale. "Hey, Margot," I asked. "You look a little pale. You feeling okay?" Yes, honey. Just a few jitters, but nothing I haven't seen before." She looked at me with her crystal blue eyes. "Some days are easier than others." Margot sat up from her creaky chair and grabbed her coat. "Call me if you need anything, Henry. If not, I'll see you at 7 a.m. sharp." I tipped my ball cap at Margot as she headed out to the dark desert night, her dress blowing widely in the wind. The motel was old. The decor resembled an old Victorian castle. The wallpaper was hanging off the strips. Roaches scurried about under many of the thick rugs. Dim lights flickered endlessly. An overwhelming smell of mothballs stung my nostrils. Who would ever want to stay in this shithole? I thought to myself. Yet, for me, the hotel reminded me of home. For hours, no one came in. Only 2 customers were staying in the motel that night. The couple from this morning after Margot and I met, and someone else who had room 46 booked. Time seemed to crawl by behind that large wooden desk. I scrolled on my phone, struggling to stay awake as the night dragged on. A little after 10 p.m., a call on the main phone buzzed. Hello, front desk. I spoke, clearing my throat. Hey, I'm in room 46. Listen here. The room next to me sounds like they're having a damn party. Stomping around and moving shit around. They're in 47, right next to mine. You know, your walls aren't too thick here, pal. I checked behind me, scanning the key holder for 47. The old brass key is still hung on 47's slot. I'm sorry, sir, but no one's in room 47. Are you sure that's where it's coming from? Positive. I got my ear right in the wall. Can't you hear it? I listened closely, not being able to make out whatever shuffling or moving he was hearing. I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear anything, but I can assure you no one is in room 47. I have the only key down here, and I'm staring at it. The man on the line drew silent. You for sure? He asked. I am, I shakily replied. Okay then, brother. Good night. He then hung up, and I hung up the phone and felt that nervous feeling inside my stomach bubble, like moths fluttering around towards my throat. I looked over the paper Margot gave me. There it stood, Rule 2. Room 47 must never be booked. My mind started racing on what the hell this guy was hearing. Part of me wanted to go check on the room. I fought myself on it and decided to stay, in case any customers came in. Time dragged on, and I was still glued to my phone. My eyes strained under the dim lights. I lifted my head and stretched my back. That's when I saw the figure outside of the glass door. He was tall, with a large dark trench coat on down to his knees. His head tilted to the side. I couldn't make out any features. I nearly jumped out of my skin. He seemed to be holding something. It laid on the floor below him. He tapped the glass, sending thick thuds booming out. I watched on as he tapped the glass before slowly pushing it open. He walked in like he was on stilts. A tall man. Had to be over 7 feet. The large black trench coat ran to the length of his whole body. A dusty, worn-out top hat placed neatly on top of his head. Stringy blonde hair fell across his pale face. His sunken-in eyes were like that of a cat's. He stumbled over to me, dragging some wooden crate across the floor behind him. I clenched my seat, feeling panic rise inside me. The man slowly revealed what he was holding behind his back. He produced a wooden doll, about the size of a toddler, placing it on the desk. Its gangly limbs fell to its sides. It only took me a second to realize it was a puppet of me. Same beat-up white shirt, black trunks, and red baseball hat. Its lifeless wooden features stared back at me. I looked up at the man who loomed over me, casting a large ominous shadow on the wall. He cracked a wicked smile across his pointy face, revealing rows of yellow teeth. His dried lips littered with cracks of bleeding dead cuts. The puppeteer slid his hand up the back of the Henry puppet and spoke in a childlike voice, moving the lips of the Henry puppet. "Room 47, please," he spoke. A chill rattled down my spine, sending waves of goosebumps across my body. I stood with my mouth open, frozen on what to do. The puppeteer moved with elegance, like he was being controlled as a marionette doll. The Henry doll spoke again in that childlike voice. "Room 47, please." He moved the doll's arm to point towards the key rack. Sorry. Room 47 isn't available," I stuttered, my fingers tapping the rule list furiously. The puppeteer cocked his head sideways, his burning auburn eyes staring into me. I turned to the Henry doll, twisting its head to the side. The wooden lips of the doll chattered on. "I would like a room, please." The puppeteer nodded along, agreeing with the Henry doll. "Sure," I said, sliding the chair over the key rack. I tracked my hands along the available keys, trying to find a room away from the other customer's room. The farthest room away was room 72. I grabbed the key and handed it to the puppeteer. He looked at me, wide-eyed and confused, motioning his head to the doll. The wooden Henry doll sat motionless, its faded colors and loose-hanging mouth staring into a void. Raising the doll's arm up, the puppeteer giggled to himself. I slid the key ring onto Henry doll's arm. The puppeteer swung the doll under his trench coat with a swift motion and turned towards the door. "Hey, that'll be 65 for the night." Feeling like I had just been shaken down, the puppeteer froze in place with his hunched over body and long limbs. The air seemed to be sucked out of the room when I said that, like someone hit the pause button. His head turned, brushing the loose, stringy hair from his face. A sick smile drew across his face, his dull yellow teeth like rows of chiclets. I tried to swallow the large lump in my throat, feeling my palms sweating. The pressure in my head was rising. My ears were ringing. The puppeteer dropped a few bills onto the floor and headed out the door, slipping into the dark, windy night. The night went on without any hiccups after that. As the sun began to break out from beyond the horizon, a beat-up old car pulled up to the front. Margot stepped out with a box of donuts in her hand. She met me at the desk and asked how my night went. I told her about the man calling to complain about room 47. Margot told me that room usually acts up at night, but nothing as bad as it does during the day. When she asked about the puppeteer, I felt like she could already sense my hesitation. She handed me a donut and pressed further, wanting to know what the puppeteer had asked. I told her he came in, had a puppet of me, and asked for a room. "Did you give him a room?" she questioned, taking a large bite of her donut. She chewed loudly as I told her I gave him room 72. "Oh yeah. Well, first he asked for room 47, but I remember from the list that room 47 isn't supposed to be booked." Margot stopped chewing, her brows raised. "He asked for room 47? Pieces of donuts falling out of her mouth. "He never does that." Margot raced behind the desk and started rummaging through her cabinet. Her behavior made me feel on edge. "Oh, whoa! I followed the rules. I didn't book him in the room," I pleaded. "But he asked for it," Margot snapped back at me. She pulled out a rusty blowtorch from the cabinet. "What the hell is that?" I questioned. "Listen, son, I should have explained better. The rules can get confusing at times. Always listen to the puppeteer. I didn't think he'd be throwing curveballs at you like that on their first night." Well, what happens now?" Feeling the fear rising inside of me. "Come with me." Margot headed down the hall like a great general leading her troops into battle. I followed behind. The zigzag pattern on the carpet made my eyes water. We stopped in front of room 47. "We're going inside, son. We're going to find whatever is in there and burn it. It's the only way." "Find what?" I asked as Margot fumbled the key into the slot. She determinedly opened the door and headed in. The room was dark, and musty particles floated in the air. A rotten stench blew into our faces, making the both of us gag. Margot started on the blowtorch, sending out a quick blast that illuminated the room. A shadow of something painted on the wall. I held her shoulder tight, hiding behind her, as I shone my phone flashlight on. I scanned it around the room, stopping it on the bed. On the worn-out, stained bare mattress, a doll sat neatly. It was me. The Henry doll sat facing towards the wall, its head turned away from us. Its legs hung neatly off the bed, where his arms rested in his lap. We carefully stepped towards the doll. Margot had the blowtorch ready. Then, the world went silent. Surrounded by the darkness, a ringing in my ears surged on. The pressure rose again, like when the puppeteer was leaving before. The Henry doll's head turned slightly, the creaking of wood droning on. It turned until it was eye to eye with us. Its worn-out face and loose open mouth met our gaze. Margot, without warning, blasted the doll with a blowtorch. We stood in the light of the burning blue flame, feeling the sweat race down our faces as the doll of me went up in flames. The head continued to spin as it became encased in flames. It fell to the floor in a burning pile. Margot dragged me out of the room and shut the door. My body surged like someone shoved a hot coal down my throat. "Oh, wait, it's still burning. It'll burn down the motel," I cried. We stood as the orange flames burned on under the door, creating a wave of light. We watched as the flames surged on, only for them to burn out and return to darkness. The ringing in my ear faded. "There," Margot huffed and puffed. "That should do it for today." Margot and I walked back to the front desk. The box of donuts sat neatly atop. "Come, Henry. Let's chat a bit first. I'm sure you're eager to get some rest, but this will just take a minute." Margot and I headed back to her office. Thousands of questions flooded into my head, and this was only from the first night.